Hey folks, that's the wrong camera. I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and well, this is the Truthear Hexa. If you read the title of this video, you already know I'm going to give this a very positive score. But what you might not know is that the Truthear Hexa is coming in at just 80 bucks. And for 80 bucks, you're getting a hybrid driver IM that's coming with 3 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver, and it's tuned to just about exactly my reference target. I swear this is not a collab. So you might reasonably expect that I like this a lot. And ever since I published the frequency response of the Hexa about a week ago, it's been getting comparisons to some other neutral tuned IEMs, including the Moondrop Blessing 2, which you probably recall is one of my favorite IEMs. So what I figured we would do for this review is I'll talk about why I like the Hexa so much. And then we'll compare it with some of those more expensive IEMs and just kind of put into context just how good the Hexa is, but maybe also find out where's the limit. So like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're watching now live, how's it going? Happy Thursday evening. Yeah, if you've got any questions about the Hexa or anything else that we talk about, please leave it in the live chat. And at the end of the review, we will have some time for back and forth conversation. Otherwise, a quick shout out to Shenzhen Audio for sending the Hexa in for review. I do have a link to them in the description down below if you want to check out the Hexa. But without further ado, let's go to the table and start talking about the physical stuff here on this IEM. Okay, first of all, what's in the box? And first of all, here is the box. That is tame art. I'm willing to put that on stream, but yeah, nice simple packaging. They actually have a frequency response here on the back of it. But as I often say, you want to look at frequency responses. You want to compare them to graphs made on the same rig. So you see a graph like this, it looks promising, but what does it actually look like? Check it out on squig.link to see how it compares to other IEMs. But anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. Nice box anyway. But what you get inside the box is pretty much exactly what you got with the Truthear Zero. If you recall, that IEM came out a few months ago. And it's not bad, but pretty simple. I guess what you would expect for about 80 bucks. They do include this little carry case. And this is very, very minimalistic. It's completely soft. Actually a little bit strange, almost kind of like an old school coin purse or something like that, but it is effective, I guess, and it looks nice and feels pretty decent. So there's that, and it's pocketable. They also do include a ton of tips. They've got 2 different sets of silicone tips, some with wide bore, some with a little bit narrower bore, and then they've also got 1 set of foam tips. So, I mean, mostly what I will say is having different sets of tips means it's good for being able to find what fits you ideally. I wouldn't expect a ton of differences in the sound with those tips, and you might notice I'm not using any of these tips. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. They're fine tips, don't get me wrong, but I did like this IM enough that I customized it and put on some of my favorite tips. But that's what comes inside the box apart from the IM itself. So let's unfurl this and start talking about the build quality on the IMs and this cable. Now, the cable that comes here on the Truthear Hexa is exactly the same cable that we got with the Truthear Zero, which is a pretty unflashy cable, but honestly, like, this is a pretty solid, just like bare bones. This is what an IEM cable should be. Behavior and handling on this is actually really good. You can see it's not memory prone, it's not overly stiff, but it's also not getting kinks or anything like that. And again, it doesn't look flashy, it doesn't look especially nice, but I promise you, this is actually a really good cable to live with. In fact, I like this cable well enough that I ended up putting the same cable on my Truthear Audio Monarch Mark II. That's a $1,000 IEM. Let's see, it does have very small hardware, which I like to see. It's got a very functional chin slider, also like to see that. Stays in place quite nicely. And then of course you've got your preformed ear hooks and relatively, actually quite small 2-pin connectors, which is again, what I like to see. So overall pretty happy with the cable, but that's gonna lead us into talking about these here earpieces, which I will be honest, I'm similarly impressed with. In fact, probably even more impressed with these earpieces. I think these are actually really, really quite good. So aesthetically, it is a simple, clean aesthetic, but it does have enough styling cues to make it stand out and look pretty unique. It's got like these chiseled lines, which I like, to give it a little bit of dimensionality. But overall, obviously, this is pretty low key. It's just a black IM. It's got the outer shell here, I believe, is made out of a metal. And then on the inside, you've actually got what I believe is a 3D printed plastic shell. Kind of reminds me of something like the Moondrop Blessing 2, or even more exactly, the Moondrop Variations, which had a very similar smoky look to its 3D shell. And you can see through it. I don't know if I'm getting a little bit of light through there. You can kind of see where the bores and the tuning bores and stuff are inside of there. So it's nice to be able to get a little hint of a look, but it ends up just overall being a really clean aesthetic on this IM. The earpieces themselves, I would say, are actually pretty, I don't know, I've gotten some feedback that people think that this is a large IM, or they're concerned about the nozzle on this IM. Gotta be honest, I think that the size of this is actually pretty, it's like medium small in my opinion. So it's quite a compact package, and I guess it's going to lead us into talking about the ergonomics here on the Truthear Hexa, which I gotta be honest, I'm also pretty impressed with. So I'll throw this in my ear so you can take a look at what the Hexa looks like inside my ear, and there you go. It is nice and compact. Let's see, what can I say about the ingress egress? As you just saw, nice and easy fit. Comfort is actually really good, even though it does have like some of these angled bits on the outer shell. It's all like the metal paneling is even quite rounded on the edges, so I don't feel anything in terms of discomfort. In fact, I've gone through a number of nights already sleeping through the night with these things in my ear, and that also, you know, speaks to the fit security of the Truthear Hexa. Like, it actually fits and stays in place way better than most IMs in this price range. Is it quite as good as like a semi-custom design, like let's say the Thea Audio Legacy 2? Not quite, but to be honest, it's pretty close. It's not far. I really don't have any complaints about the build and the ergonomics on this set. What I will talk about briefly, and I alluded to this, is that some people have kind of noticed that the nozzle on the Hexa is a little bit wide. It's about 6.2 millimeters if you're measuring, but it is, as you might see, let's see, I'll get an angle on there. It's effectively straight for quite a while, which means it's not like tapered near the end and getting bigger as it goes out. That just means that, at least for my ears, I have zero issues with this thing fitting in comfortably. And it also does hold on ear tips pretty well. I'll just mention that because, again, that was another concern that people seem to have just based on the pictures of it. So that is the physical stuff. I don't think there's anything more for me to say here about the Hexa's build quality, except that, again, it's nice and simple. Maybe it's a little bit too simple, but I really have no complaints about the aesthetic, the build quality, the fit, the comfort. Really just pretty standout on all fronts. So how's it sound? Am I just as impressed? To be honest, yes. Yes, I am. So let's talk about how the Hexa sounds. And we'll start like I typically do by just describing the sound signature. And as I kind of already alluded to, this is a neutral tuned IM. No, really, this is neutral. This is almost exactly my neutral target. If you're familiar with my neutral target, I did a video about it not too long ago. This is basically that. It does have maybe a little bit more sub bass emphasis than my target, and then maybe in the upper treble it's a little bit below my target, but really, for all intents and purposes, this would be considered a neutral IM. It does have a nice media low end, which is not a bassy set. I would not describe the Truthear Hexa as a bassy set per my target, but it does still have a nice bit of meat to the lower mid-range and the mid-bass that gives it that body and that sense of physicality that I like in my IMs, and it adds kind of a nice weight to things like kick drums without really requiring a lot of bass, like some, you know, Harman-tuned IMs might need. So that is the general sound signature here. There's not much more to say about that. So let's talk about why do I like the Truthear Zero. And so that tonal balance, of course, it being neutral and to my target, I'm going to describe it as effectively a perfect frequency response. It's closer to my target, honestly, than anything in this price range, and just about closer to my target than anything else I've heard. It is, let's see, it does have maybe a smidge of brightness, but with overall a relatively low contrast mid-range, which is what I like. You get a bit of warmth and fullness, sort of the lower mid-range, but you get a cool bit of brightness, again, just kind of up touch that adds a lightness to the sound. I think vocals sound centered with the set, but kind of overall effortless, right? They're not overly pushed forward and stressed at all. This is just like, this sounds exactly right to me, which is a mid-range focused sound with a nice meaty bass and decent treble extension. So I like that. And while we're on the topic of talking about the treble, I actually think the treble is really, really well done on this. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, because in this price range, especially with balanced armatures, it is very, very common to have treble that just comes across a little bit plasticky, or maybe even a little bit strident. And really the Truthear Hexa never comes across strident. Really, really well done. So for 80 bucks, I think it's kind of unreal. But honestly, even without that caveat, it's really, really well done. It's never sharp, it extends well, and because of that good extension, you actually get surprisingly good timbre on high frequency percussion stuff. Things like cymbals, hi-hats, and drum brushes that can sound a little bit awkward if there's not sufficient treble extension, come across quite well here on the Truthear Hexa. And then I think also because of that, I would say better treble extension than you would expect. You get, I think, a decent sense of imaging, a decent sense of micro contrast throughout the mid-range. Is the imaging on the set standout? No, to be honest, I wouldn't say it's standout imaging, but some well-tuned sets do kind of suffer for the text, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And I really think the Hexa does not. And then the last bit I'll say that I like about this set a lot is the bass tuning. Again, it's my neutral tune. Don't be surprised there, but I love the bass levels on the set. Again, I would not describe this as a bassy IM, but it's also neither a bass light IM. It's just got kind of the perfect balance. It gives it a good sense of body and firmness to the sound, without ever becoming distracting from the mid-range or otherwise bloating or smearing up anything else. So that's what I love here about the Truthear Hexa. Are there some things that I would complain about? What are some things I don't like about it? Well, honestly, not much. At this price range, at 80 bucks, I really have no serious complaints. But at the risk of overhyping this IM, I do want to kind of set your expectations, all right? The technical performance here on the Hexa, I would say is better than they should be at this price range, but they're not going to blow anyone out of the water, okay? Just to, again, set your expectations. I think that treble timbre is actually really good on the set, but it does sacrifice a little bit of incisiveness with things like guitar plucks and vocal edginess. And yeah, just overall, I would say it's probably competitive with some sets up to like 200 bucks or so, but I'm not going to say that this thing is a technical performer that's going to knock out kilobuck IMs, all right? Just set your expectations. And then I guess actually my one probably most significant quibble about this IM is that the bass is not the most articulate. I would say that the attack on the bass, kind of like the initial hit of it, comes across a little bit slow. And at this price, honestly, it's perfectly competent. Again, no complaints about the quality of it. And I will say that the reserved bass levels do avoid any issues with that somewhat slow bass becoming smeary or bloaty or anything like that. But just, again, temper your expectations with the quality of the bass. This is not the best quality bass out there. And then I guess the final caveat that I'll put here is that a neutral tonality is not going to flatter. It's not going to be for everyone, and honestly, it's just not going to flatter a lot of recordings that are lackluster. So if you rely on a colorful, contrasty tonality to, I don't want to say correct, but make your poor recording sound great, this is not going to do that. This is just going to really give you exactly what you're listening to, as cleanly and I think accurately as it comes. So those are my thoughts here on the Truthear Hexa. A lot of pretty positive things to say, but like I like to do, I like to put it into context. So I'm going to pull in some other IMs, and we're going to talk about how the Hexa compares with them, okay? Let's see. Of course, we've got to talk about how it compares with the Etymotic ER2XR, which is another neutral tuned IM in at about this price range. Maybe a little bit more expensive depending on where you're at, but I think, you know, kind of roughly the same ballpark as the Hexa in terms of market. But I think it's also worth comparing to the Truthear Audio Legacy 4, which I've been listening to with the switch turned on, which makes it a pretty neutral tuned IM, but not quite in the price range anymore. Well, actually, let me briefly say this is a one dynamic driver IM in the ER2XR. The Truthear Audio Legacy 4 is a hybrid IM, just like the Truthear Hexa. This is a 3 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic drivers. similarly neutral tuned, although there are some variations, which we'll talk about. And just because I'm crazy, I think it's also worth just talking about how this compares with the Moondrop Blessing 2. Again, I don't want to say that, temper your expectations. I'm not trying to say that this thing is going to kill that thing, but if people are going to be making these comparisons anyway because of the frequency response, I think it's good enough, or it's good for us to kind of put it into context with just how good is it? Is it better than that? Is it better than that? Is it competitive with that? Let's get into it. So sound signature wise, let's talk about the differences. They are all some version of neutral, but they are also somewhat different. The Truthear Hexa, I would say, is neutral, somewhat warm, lower mid-range. It's a little bit relaxed in sort of the mid-range, which again is what I like. The bass does have a nice bit of meat to it, but no bloat. And I would say that overall, it is actually a little bit bassier than the Blessing 2, but pretty close in bass levels if you're familiar with that one. The Etymotic ER2XR, I would also describe as very neutral. It's got a bit more of a sub-bass emphasis. It does have a bit of a bass boost in it. That is the XR model. But the bass boost in this set is a little bit more sub-bass focused than the Truthear Hexa, which just means that it's a little bit leaner in the lower mid-range, especially. And I would also say that the vocals are pushed forward a little bit more with the Etymotic. But overall, honestly, pretty similar tonality to the Hexa. The Legacy 4, again, I'm going to describe this with the switch turned on, which makes it more of a neutral set. Again, kind of neutral. I would say that of the bunch, this one comes across a little bit brighter and a little bit thinner, so a little bit less meat in the mid bass. Again, it does have a sub bass boost, but a little bit thinner and leaner in the lower mid range, a little bit more forward in the vocal range, and then a little bit brighter in kind of like the lower treble region, which just gives it maybe a little bit more excitement to your typical neutral tune. And then finally the Moondrop Blessing 2, which has been basically the basis of my neutral target for a long time. No surprise, I will describe this as neutral. Versus the Hexa, I would say that the Blessing 2 actually comes across a little bit brighter, and again, a little bit less bass levels. But overall, I would say that the bass tuning here is actually, it has a lot in common with that, which of these, like the reason I like these two so much is that the bass level is still very polite in the bass, but it's not shy about that mid bass body to it. So that is the overall tonality. If I'm ranking these purely on tonality, I'll be honest, I think just based on my frequency response, I have to say that the Truthear Hexa is my favorite. The Moondrop Blessing 2, a very close second. And then finally, I would say that the Etymotic ER2XR lands here with the Legacy 4 down here. So that would be my ranking. I like all of these sets quite a bit, just to put this into context. And I'm putting the Truthear Hexa as, I think, my favorite tonally. But let's talk about how these things compare when it comes to technical performance. This is where you would expect price differences to really start to stand out, right? So the Truthear Hexa, honestly, the balanced armatures in this, very surprisingly smooth. Again, for the price range especially, but even at like double the price range, it's not uncommon to have balanced armatures just come across a little bit plasticky or brittle or sharp or anything, and you don't get any of that here on the Truthear Hexa. Really quite good. I think you get appropriately textured mids. My only complaint would be that, I don't know, the Truthear Hexa does lack a bit of incisiveness in the treble. Like it's not on, if there's like a line between sharp and easy, the Hexa, it leans more toward easy, more toward smooth. And sometimes I do like it to be a little bit more sharp. And I think that I think that again, the imaging performance on this is pretty decent, but because the treble is not quite that incisive, it does lack a little bit for that. The Etymotic ER2XR, where are we at? We're over here. I would say that, again, this is a dynamic driver set. I would say it does come across a little bit over smoothed. That's kind of always been my beef with the ER2XR. It's a mild beef because it's a very good IEM, but it can lack a little bit of texture, especially in like the treble and the bass. I do think that the mid-range is actually really well done, specifically vocals. Not just the tuning is really good, but you get a nice sense of micro contrast. But I do think that technical performance-wise, I do think that the Truthear Hexa is a step above the Etymotic ER2XR. The Legacy 4, again, now we're talking about more than double the price of the Truthear Hexa. I would say that because of that tune that I was describing, this kind of comes across maybe a little bit more lively. You get a little bit cleaner, more significant separation between sounds, and I would say that the imaging comes across maybe a little bit better than it does on the Truthear Hexa. The upper treble, however, I would actually say is probably less good on the Legacy 4. It comes across a little bit more artificial, a little bit more plasticky. So there's, you know, maybe trading blows, and I would actually say that the bass on the Legacy 4 is better. Not just the bass levels are better, but like specifically the bass texture, the definition on the attack and the control, where again, the Truthear can come across maybe a little bit slow, a little bit soft in that bass. The Legacy 4 is actually pretty good, even though it's still pretty polite levels of bass. And then finally, the Moondrop Blessing 2 technical performance, I would say, is, in my opinion, on this table, next level in terms of mid-range resolution. Yes, even above the Truthear Hexa. Imaging, I would say, is also a little bit more exaggerated versus the Hexa, which to me is a good thing. You just get more space between sounds. I think you get more incisive treble with the Blessing 2 as well, which helps add to that sense of definition. It does come maybe with a slight risk of sharpness here in the Blessing 2, but again, if I'm picking sides on a little bit too sharp versus a little bit too soft, I'll generally choose a little bit too sharp. So I do like that aspect here. I will say that the Blessing 2 lacks in treble, upper treble extension. And versus the Zero, I would actually say that the Zero does a better job with that timbre and high frequency percussion. Whereas on the Blessing 2, because of that dip in the upper treble, it can come across just a little bit stick-like, I suppose, with things like hi-hats. So that is how they compare. I gotta rank them, of course, but to be honest, like, I'm being real. This is where I gotta put things into perspective. I do think that the Blessing 2 has by far the best techs here on the table. I do think that the Legacy 4 and the Hexa kind of trade blows. Like, again, there's some advantages for the Legacy 4, especially the bass, and a little bit more exaggerated imaging performance, but the Hexa is really not far behind in a lot of those categories and is better in some. So I'll put those even. And then finally, I will leave the Etymotic ER2 XR here at the bottom. Again, I love all of these IMs, but we gotta rank them. So the final thing I will talk about here is form factor. Again, the Hexa, low key, I think is actually pretty stellar. Really solid build. Visually, I think it's interesting on close inspection, but it is pretty tame looking. If you're just looking at it, you know, at this level. And I think the medium small fit is a really nice alternative to something like, especially the Blessing 2. It's just nice and comfortable, stays in place. Really no complaints here about the form factor on the Hexa. The Etymotic, okay. I mean, what can be said about Etymotic fit that hasn't already been said? This is a very deep fitting IM, if it's not obvious by seeing it on the table. It's nice and small, which is cool. And it is, you know, nice build quality, but it is, we'll call it an invasive fit. It is aggressive, and it can be difficult to take these things in and out of your ears frequently. If you're not doing that, like if you're just getting on a plane and you really want a lot of sound isolation, something like the Etymotic ER2 can actually be really good. But if you want something to just kind of live with daily, honestly, the fit on this is a reason why I don't reach for it very often. The Legacy 4, all right, let's punch in on this so we can take a look. Aesthetically, I think it's, I don't know, it's kind of a little bit generic looking. It's not bad, but fit-wise, ergonomics-wise, this is absolutely perfect for me. In fact, I would say the Legacy 4 and the Legacy 2 are the best fitting IMs I've ever worn. It's just got this semi-custom molded design that maybe it won't fit your ear as exactly well as it does mine, but it fits me perfectly. It's a little bit on the medium small size too, which is nice. A lot of these semi-custom shells are maybe a little bit on the large side, and there it becomes a little bit more difficult to recommend it to people. But here, I think it's because of the size, it should fit a lot of people, and I've gotten only positive feedback from other people that have tried it. So really pretty happy with the form factor in this. The aesthetic, not quite as much, but it's not bad. And then finally, Moondrop Blessing 2. I love the look of this IM still. This one came out about 2 years ago, and I still really love to look at it. I love the clear resin, being able to see through and all the drivers inside. But it is worth talking about the fit on the Blessing 2. This is a large IM. In fact, let's maybe bring this in comparison with the Hexa, since I know people are kind of curious about it. And let's take off the tips, so we're comparing apples to apples. And you know what? Let's take off the cables just to make this comparison as easy as possible. All right, the Blessing 2 versus the Hexa. From this angle, might not appear that different. Look at it from the top down, and you probably can tell the Blessing 2 is, I don't even want to say it's that big at this point, because there are IMs out there that are much, much larger, but it is large enough that some people have reported to me that they have issues fitting it. So, and I understand that. The nozzles, right? We talked about the nozzle width on these things. You can kind of see in comparison why I think the Hexa's nozzle won't be as big of an issue, is that it's got like this straight run here for about, I don't know, half a centimeter there, whereas the Blessing 2 just starts getting wider almost immediately. So really quite like the aesthetic here on the Blessing 2, and for me it actually fits really well, but just as a fair warning, that might not fit everybody quite as well. If I were to rank these things in terms of the form factor, for me personally, I'm still going to give the Blessing 2 the win. But the Truthear Hexa would be my next favorite, followed up by the Legacy 4, and unfortunately, Etymotic, you get demoted down there again. So I think that is just about going to do it. Let me put this cable back on. Oh my gosh, there we go. That's just about going to do it for my thoughts here on the Truthear Hexa. Again, you read the title of this video. You already know I'm giving this thing 5 stars out of 5. I think that at even double the price of this IM, it would be like an easy recommendation. At 80 bucks, it's a no-brainer. Now, is everyone gonna like this IM as much as I do? Probably not. Again, this is a neutral tune. Set your expectations. But this is like one of the easiest recommendations I can make. If you are in line with my preferences for neutral tune, mid-range focused, and just nice clean performance, and you want something that fits really well, like it really just hits everything right. And that's why I'm personally really excited about the Hexa. And if you're interested in checking it out, I do have a link in the description down below, but while you're down there, don't just go there for the link. Go there for the like button. Please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Ding the YouTube bell. YouTube will let you know next time I'm live. And then I'll see you in the next super review. Unless you're here live now, in which case, let's hang out and have a chat. Let me